A luxury showroom, cold white light reflecting off marble floors. In the center sits a $1 million Italian supercar, a silent ghost with its hood wide open. A red tag hangs on the engine. Impossible. Elite engineers stand with crossed arms, tablets glowing with useless data, shaking their heads in defeat. CEO Victoria Hale stares in frustration, eyes like frozen daggers. In the dark corner, Lucas Reed, a single dad, wipes grease-stained hands. Someone snickers. Even the factory gave up. Move along, old man. Lucas steps forward in silence. He ignores screens, placing his ear against the cold manifold. 10 minutes later, the room goes deathly silent. His name is Lucas Reed, 42 years old, a man whose weathered face hides a lifetime of hard lessons, high-speed dreams, and unspoken grief. To the wealthy elite who bring their mechanical masterpieces to this high-end facility, he is simply the contract guy, a shadow in a grease-stained jumpsuit that has seen better decades. He doesn't wear the polished corporate uniform of the factory-certified technicians, and he certainly doesn't carry the latest carbon fiber diagnostic tablets that cost more than his car. He is the man they call only when the experts have reached the end of their logic, a ghost who exists in the quiet spaces between the roar of high-performance engines and the silence of the scrapyard. His world revolves around a 9-year-old boy named Noah, who is currently sitting in the workshop lounge, tucked into an oversized leather armchair that makes him look even smaller. Noah is surrounded by his school books, struggling with a math problem while the rhythmic clatter of air tools echoes in the distance. Every afternoon, Noah waits for his father to finish his shift, the distant, guttural symphony of roaring engines serving as the background music to his childhood. For Lucas, Noah is the reason the world still spins. He isn't interested in the prestige of the Italian brands, the glitter of the billionaire lifestyle, or the political games played in the boardroom upstairs. He is a man who values the quiet, the simple, and the honest. A man who has traded a world of fame for a world of silence. But nobody at Hale Investment Group knows who Lucas Reed really was. 15 years ago, his name was spoken in hushed, reverent tones within the corridors of the world's most elite automotive labs. He was a lead engineer in high-performance dynamics, a prodigy who designed the very beating hearts of the world's fastest supercars. He was a master of metal and fire, a man who could calculate the flow of fuel in a cylinder down to the microscopic droplet just by feeling the vibration of the fuel line. But then, the accident happened. During a high-speed engine test on a rain-slick track in northern Italy, a catastrophic failure he hadn't seen coming took the life of his closest colleague and friend. The sound of the explosion, the smell of burning magnesium, it stayed with him. The guilt was a heavy, suffocating blanket. Lucas didn't just walk away from his career. He vanished from the industry entirely, leaving behind the awards and the fame. He traded the high-stakes laboratory for a humble wrench, choosing a life of relative obscurity so he could raise Noah alone, far away from the crushing pressure and the cold. Calculating science that he believed had cost a life. Lucas believes that engines have a soul. He believes that if you are quiet enough, if you truly listen, they will tell you exactly where they are hurting. He doesn't need a computer to talk to a machine. He uses his senses, his intuition, and the weight of a decade of regret. He hears the metal breathe, he feels the heat pulse through the block, and he understands the story behind every vibration. To him, a machine is a living creature, and right now this Italian masterpiece was crying out in a language only he could speak. Victoria Hale is the woman who owns the silent car. At 40, she is the CEO of one of the most powerful investment firms in the country. She is known for her icy composure, her sharp, cutting tongue, and her absolute intolerance for anything less than perfection. The car, a limited edition Italian prototype, was the jewel of her personal collection, purchased at a high-stakes auction where ego was the primary currency. It was supposed to be the centerpiece of a major corporate event, a symbol of her company's unstoppable power and precision. But during the grand entrance, In front of the world's most influential investors, the engine died. It didn't just stall, it became a silent, cold piece of art. For Victoria, this wasn't just a mechanical failure. It was a public embarrassment, a crack in her carefully constructed armor. Her reputation was on the line, and her patience had reached its absolute limit. She stood by the car, her eyes cold as flint, watching the factory engineers scramble like panicked ants, knowing that every minute of silence was a blow to her dignity. She didn't want a repair, she wanted a miracle. The factory team, led by a man named Marcus who prides himself on his triple redundant certifications and his clean, white lab coat, is exhausted. They have been at it for 6 hours, surrounded by nitrogen-cooled servers and fiber-optic diagnostic cables. They have connected every high-speed diagnostic computer available, but the screens remain hauntingly blank. No software errors, no warning codes. The digital brain of the car is telling them that every system is operational, while the mechanical body refuses to wake up. "We've tried everything, Ms. Hale," Marcus says, his voice tight as he wipes a bead of nervous sweat from his brow. "We've replaced the electronic control modules. We've swapped out the primary and secondary fuel pumps. We've even bypassed the entire ignition sequence to force a manual start. There is no logical reason for this car not to start. The data tells us it's running, but as you can see, it's dead. It's a phantom error." Victoria looks at the car, then at the experts with their useless gadgets. "I didn't pay you for logic," she says, her voice dropping to a dangerous, sharp whisper that makes the air in the workshop feel 10 degrees colder. "I paid you for results. Are you telling me that a $5 million machine, a peak of human engineering, is now a paperweight? My investors are waiting upstairs, and you're giving me logic and phantoms?" Marcus looks down at the engine, his confidence shattered. He knows his career is on the line. He pulls a red tag from his pocket and hangs it over the carbon fiber intake manifold, a white flag of surrender. In bold, black letters, it reads, "Impossible." "There's a fundamental design flaw," Marcus mutters in trying to save his own reputation by blaming the creators in Italy. "Something in the core architecture has failed on a physical level that the software cannot reach. It's beyond repair in a standard workshop. It needs to go back to Italy, to be dismantled in a clean room by the original design team. And even then, it might never run again. It's a ghost in the machine, ma'am." A few of the younger technicians let out a frustrated laugh, a laugh of pure surrender. They begin to pack their expensive tool, accepting the verdict. They look at Lucas in the corner and snicker. "Look at him," one whispers. "Does he think he's going to find something the satellites missed?" Lucas Reed is standing 10 feet away, leaning against a stack of racing tires. He hasn't moved for over an hour. He has been watching the way the engineers touch the car, seeing them rely on screens rather than their own hands. He saw them torque the bolts with electric drivers instead of feeling the tension. He sees the frustration on Victoria's face, a look of desperate, silent fury that he recognizes from his own past life. He knows she's about to walk away and sell the car for parts. "I need 10 minutes, Lucas says, his voice low, but cutting through the noise of the packing engineers like a sharp blade. "I need 10 minutes with it. Just me and the engine. No computers, no tablets, no noise. I need the room quiet." Victoria turns her icy gaze toward him. She sees a man in grease-stained work pants, a man with no corporate badge, no official certification. She looks at his hands. They are scarred and stained with years of labor. "I have just spent $50,000 for experts to tell me it's impossible," she says, her voice dripping with skepticism. "Why should I give 10 minutes to a contract mechanic who looks like he belongs in a scrapyard rather than a showroom?" Lucas doesn't flinch. He doesn't look offended. He just looks at the car, almost as if he's apologizing to it for the way it's been treated. "Because those experts are looking at the software," he says quietly. "I'm looking at the metal. A computer can't tell you if a screw is tired. A computer can't feel the vibration of a misaligned gear or the micro-expansion of an alloy that wasn't tempered quite right. You've paid for their tablets. Now give me 10 minutes of your time. It costs you nothing, and the car is already impossible, right? What do you have to lose but the silence? Victoria hesitates. The pressure of the event upstairs is weighing on her. She can hear the muffled music and the clinking of glasses. She looks at her watch, then at the red tag, then at the calm, steady eyes of the man in the corner. There is something in his gaze, a certainty that Marcus lacked. It's the look of a man who has nothing to prove and everything to give. 10 minutes, she snaps. But if you touch something you shouldn't, or if you waste another second of my time, you'll never work in this city again. Step aside, everyone. Let the specialist have his moment. Lucas nods. He doesn't grab a computer. He doesn't grab a manual. He just waits, waiting for the noise to die down, waiting for the right moment to step into the light and listen to the metal secrets. The factory team heads to the lounge, their mocking laughter echoing down the hallway. "Good luck, grease monkey," Marcus shouts back. The workshop falls into a heavy, expectant silence. Only Victoria remains, standing by the glass doors, her arms crossed tight, her eyes fixed on Lucas. She doesn't expect a result. She expects an excuse. Lucas doesn't move immediately. He stands over the open engine bay, his eyes closed. He isn't thinking about codes or voltages. He is breathing in the smell of the car, the scent of high-octane fuel and heated, synthetic oil. He is reading the machine with his nose, his skin, his very presence. He is looking for a story of friction. He reaches out and touches the intake plenum, his fingers feeling the residual heat. He reaches down, his fingers moving with a surgeon's precision. He doesn't use a wrench yet. He places his bare hand on the crankshaft pulley and rotates it slowly, centimeter by centimeter. He is feeling the resistance of the pistons against the cylinder walls, reading the micro-textures of the metal through his calloused fingertips. He is looking for the heartbeat. Clack. It was a tiny sound, almost a ghost of a sound, hidden behind the ambient hum of the workshop's ventilation. To the engineers with their headphones and tablets, it would have been nothing. To Lucas, it was a scream for help. He does it again, leaning his ear against the aluminum block, his cheek nearly touching the hot metal. Clack. He realizes what it is. It's a sub-axle thermal expansion error, a tiny, almost microscopic deviation in the mechanical fire order. When the engine was manufactured in Maranello, they used a new, high-performance alloy for the valve lifters, but that alloy expanded 0.3 millimeters too much when heated rapidly during the event. The computer didn't see it because the sensor was calibrated for a different tolerance, a digital blind spot. The engine was essentially choking on its own precision, a victim of its own perfection. It was a mechanical lock that no software could bypass. Lucas begins to work. He doesn't open a laptop. He pulls a single, worn-out socket wrench from his belt, a tool that has been with him since before the accident in Italy. He moves with a rhythmic, hypnotic speed. He isn't guessing. He is remembering. He is back in the labs, back when he was the one who designed these very tolerances, back when he was the one who wrote the rules of high-speed combustion. He removes the valve cover with effortless grace. He finds the offending component. He removes a thin, secondary washer from the pressure sensor, a piece of metal no thicker than a fingernail. He adjusts the fire order manually, bypassing the digital timing and setting it back to the mechanical, old-school standard that the alloy actually required. He tightens a bolt with exactly the same torque he used 15 years ago, a torque that isn't in any manual, but is etched into his muscle memory. He is sweating now, the grease on his face mixing with the intensity of the moment. He isn't just fixing a car, he is fixing the regret of his past. He is proving that the human touch still matters, that the machine is not just a collection of codes, but a living, breathing thing that requires a soul to understand its heartbeat. He can feel the car relaxing under his hands. He finishes. He wipes the oil from the intake manifold, making sure the machine is clean. He steps back, his breathing heavy. He doesn't look at Victoria. He looks at the engine. He knows it's ready. He can feel the potential energy vibrating in the cold metal, like a lion waiting to pounce. He thinks of the red tag and he feels a surge of quiet pride. He leans into the cabin, his finger hovering over the start button. He pauses. He thinks of Noah, watching from behind the glass with wide, hopeful eyes. He thinks of the friend he lost on that track in Italy. He thinks of the impossible tag. "Listen to me," he whispers to the engine. "Show them that you're alive. Show them that they forgot who made you." He doesn't press the button immediately. He listens to the wind outside, the hum of the air conditioning, the silence of the room. He waits for the exact moment when the world is quiet enough to hear the truth. He presses the button. The starter motor chirps once, just once, a sharp, crisp, metallic engagement. And then the world explodes. The V12 engine doesn't just start, it barks to life with a ferocious, terrifying roar that rattles the windows of the showroom and sends a vibration through the concrete floor. It is a deep, guttural, perfect sound. There is no stutter. There is no smoke. Just the pure, raw scream of 12 cylinders working in perfect mechanical harmony. The air in the room suddenly feels alive. Lucas steps out of the car, his face calm, his hands steady as a rock. He doesn't cheer. He doesn't smile. He just picks up his rag and walks back to his corner, disappearing into the shadows once again, leaving the experts to deal with the wake. Victoria Hale walks into the showroom, her face a mask of total, utter disbelief. She had heard the roar from the hallway, a sound she was told she would never hear again. She looks at the car, then at the dashboard. Every light is green. The idle is perfectly stable, sitting at exactly 800 RPM, smooth as silk, a mechanical heartbeat that sounds like power itself. She can feel the heat radiating from the hood, a warmth that was supposed to be impossible. The factory engineers come running back from the lounge, their mouths literally hanging open in shock. Marcus is the first to arrive, his face turning a deep, embarrassed shade of red. He scrambles for his tablet, desperate to see how it happened, desperate to find a reason why he failed where a nobody succeeded. He connects the computers, and the screens flash with a perfect health report. No ghosts, no flaws. The computer is now taking credit for a fix it didn't understand. "How?" Marcus stammers, his voice trembling as he looks at the telemetry. "The diagnostic said the timing was locked. The architecture was faulty. It was a design flaw that only the factory in Italy could fix. There's no way he could have changed the fire order without the encryption keys." Lucas doesn't answer. He just points to the carbon fiber intake manifold, where the red tag is still hanging, flapping in the vibration of the engine. Victoria walks over, her heels clicking softly but firmly on the floor. She reaches out, and with a slow, deliberate motion, she rips the impossible tag off the engine. She crumples it in her hand and throws it into the trash without a second glance. It hits the bottom of the bin with a final, satisfying thud. She turns to Lucas, truly turns to him. For the first time, she isn't looking at a grease monkey or a contract laborer. She is looking at a master. She sees the grease on his face, but she also sees the deep, quiet dignity in his eyes. She sees a man who doesn't need to shout to be heard. A man whose silence is more powerful than any corporate mission statement or marketing pitch. "You did it," she says, her voice lacking its usual icy edge. "They said it was a design flaw. They said it was a ghost in the system. They said it was impossible. What did you find that they couldn't see with all their computers?" "A 0.3 millimeter error," Lucas says simply. "A mistake in the way the metal breathes when it gets hot. Your sensors were too smart to see it. They were looking for a digital failure while the metal was just looking for a little space to expand. Sometimes, you have to be a little simpler to get the job done. You have to stop looking at the screen and start looking at the soul of the machine." The showroom is buzzing now. The technicians are whispering, trying to analyze Lucas's every move, trying to figure out the secret. They are looking at the engine as if it's a magic trick. But Lucas is already looking at the lounge. where Noah is standing by the glass, a huge, toothy smile on his face. Noah knows. He's seen his dad do this 1,000 times in their small garage at home, but never in a place this shiny. Victoria doesn't let him walk away. "Who are you, Lucas Reed?" she asks, her voice now filled with a genuine, quiet curiosity that she usually reserves for her most important partners. Because a contract mechanic doesn't fix a $5 million prototype with a hand wrench in 10 minutes of silence. "I know your name from somewhere. I've seen that look before. In a different life. On a different stage." Lucas pauses. He looks at his grease-stained hands, the oil settled into the lines of his skin. "I'm just a guy who wants to get his kid home for dinner," he says. "The car is fixed, Ms. Hale. That's all that matters. I've done my 10 minutes. My shift is over." Victoria doesn't stop. She pulls her phone from her encrypted pocket and makes a call to her lead researcher. "Get me the archives for the 2010 International Aerodynamics Summit. I need a face match for a lead engineer named Lucas Reed. Yeah, the one who disappeared after the Monza accident. The one who designed the Reed cycle ignition. Find him now." 10 minutes later, Victoria's assistant hands her a digital file. She reads it in silence, the roar of the engine still purring in the background like a contented cat. Her eyes widen as she sees the history, the patents, the awards, and the tragic accident that ended it all. She sees the photo of Lucas standing next to the world's fastest car, looking like a king. She looks at the man in the corner, and then at the little boy sitting in the lounge. She understands. She sees the weight of the world he's been carrying on his grease-stained shoulders. She walks over to Lucas, her posture different now, less like a boss and more like a peer or even a student. "I know why you left," she says softly, so the engineers can't hear her. "I know about the accident in Italy, and I know you designed the base architecture for this very engine 15 years ago. You didn't just fix it. You saved your own creation. You're the reason this car even exists." Lucas looks away, his jaw tight. He doesn't want the glory. "The past is the past, Mrs. Hale. I'm not that man anymore. I'm just Noah's father." "Not when it's this valuable," she counters. She doesn't offer him a bonus. She doesn't offer him a one-time check that he would probably refuse. "I'm restructuring my personal fleet and my company's logistics and engineering division. I need a chief of engineering, someone who knows how to listen to the metal, someone who doesn't rely on a screen to tell them the truth, someone who has a soul and remembers what it's like to build something real." Lucas looks at the offer on the screen of her phone. It's more money than he's made in the last 15 years combined, but he doesn't ask about the salary. He doesn't ask about the stock options. "What about the hours one?" he asks. "I pick up my son at 3:30 every day. I don't work weekends. I don't do overtime. I don't do corporate events. If I can't be a father first, I don't want the job. I don't care how many zeros are on that check." Victoria smiles, a genuine, warm smile that transforms her face, melting the ice. "You pick up your son at 3:30. You have a private office with a lounge for him, and you have full authority over every machine I own. Your priority is Noah. My priority is making sure a man of your talent never has to hide in a corner again. We need the man who saved the impossible engine to lead us into the future." Lucas looks at Noah. Noah is watching them. He gives his dad a small thumbs up from behind the glass. Lucas turns back to Victoria and shakes her hand. His hand is still covered in oil, but Victoria doesn't mind. She understands that the grease is a badge of honor, a sign of a man who actually does the work instead of just talking about it. As they walk out of the showroom, the V12 engine is still purring in the background, a steady, rhythmic heartbeat of mechanical perfection. The engineers are still staring at it, still trying to understand the magic they just witnessed. But the impossible car is now a symbol of something else. It is a reminder that in a world of digital perfection, the human heart and the human ear are still the most powerful tools we have. Lucas doesn't look back. He has his son, he has his dignity, and for the first time in 15 years, he can finally breathe as easily as the engine he just saved. The silence of the past is gone, replaced by a roar of a future he thought was impossible. He grips Noah's hand, and together they walk out of the white light and into the sunset. If you believe that true skill doesn't need to make noise to be heard, subscribe for more stories like this. And leave a comment. Have you ever been underestimated just because you chose to stay silent?